minute presentation each, and then we'll open discussion to everyone and people can ask questions, okay? So how did we actually get here? So the very original objective of molecular communications, if you look at this picture here, it shows the evolvement of communication systems over the years. We started off with fixed infrastructures. Before you know it, wireless communication came into the scene. People then started to go miniature. We started to see ad hoc networking. And after that, we wanted to miniaturize this even more further. You saw the birth of sensor networks. And in this whole entire time, we tried to basically streamline all the different protocols we've designed from the early days, and then it trickled down. And then we asked ourselves the question, can we miniaturize this even further? And then this whole area of molecular communications then came up, where we wanted to see, okay, can we engineer components at the nanoscale to enable communication processes? And in particular, since biological systems already have inherent communications in them, can we then utilize them and override them for communications? So you can actually see here, and the definition here is basically the ability to create communication systems and networks using biological components. And you'd notice here that I've actually underlined, actually put in red, multidisciplinary, and I'll come back a bit to that later. So you can see here's a very quick overview. We have digital information, we translate them to information molecules, and we have different ways of transporting them either through active or passive mechanisms. So then over the years, one of the early proposals was actually diffusion-based models. And over the years, then it has spread out, and we've now seen various different forms of molecular communication systems. I've just put up here a subset of examples, including bacteria nanonetworks. People have been looking not only just diffusion models of bacteria, but even the flagellated movement techniques of bacteria to actually even carry information. Calcium signaling, which is another form of diffusion-based signaling, and the session that just finished on microfluidic systems, looking at communication using fluids. And from the early days when this area started, majority of the work was in very computational, theoretical simulation work, but then we started to see different groups also reach out to experimental work as well, wet lab experimentalists and whatnot, and you can see some examples down there. A very good example was the NSF Monaco project led by Ian Akyildiz, which just ended not long ago. Those work also done at University of California and also Irvine and also Osaka University, and also in Finland as well. So when we come back to this slide, we can see that all these different areas, it's highly multidisciplinary. Each of those examples that I gave to you, which is only a subset of the larger, more different types of contributions that have been made to this field, you can see that it brings so many different areas from not just physical but natural sciences, even new emerging areas as well in molecular biology, such as synthetic biology, material science. So it's a massive, massive paradigm shift compared to what you can see on the left side there, where it has been largely the evolvement that has just centered around electromagnetics, optical and whatnot. Now it's just a massive paradigm shift. So the big question we want to ask, and in particular in this panel itself, is that what is it that we can do to facilitate young researchers? I believe the definition of young, we came up with a concession is basically master's, PhD, postdocs, right? I mean, would you agree with that as young? Pretty much, right? What is it that we can do to facilitate these young people to actually embark into this whole new area? So we've listed some challenges up here. Challenge number one, because you would notice that this area is not formalized yet, although there are certain universities who've actually created courses in molecular communication, but it's still not a common course that you'd find in all different types of universities, right? So what training could be made available to attract the younger generation into this area, and in particular, how do we cross to other disciplines? Because you can see we had work in microfluidics, that's heavily materials nanotechnology, people working in bacteria, that's heavily skewed towards molecular biology. So what is it that we need to do to develop, say, courses in undergrad and postgrad? And are these just going to be pure dry or wet lab courses? The challenge number 2 is that do we also have to focus a lot on the applications, which we also get a lot of questions when people are asking us, especially the younger people when they want to do PhDs, you know, okay, if I look at this molecular communication system, what can I apply it to? What are some applications? And predominantly up till now, I don't know whether the members of the panel agree, majority of the works has been very theoretical. And there's very, very little work that has focused on application, although we're starting to see, I would say in the last year or 2, work in drug delivery models, biosensing and target localization. And so we're keen to even modeling even diseases also as well, right? We're starting to see that as well. But do we need to increase that? Should it only be focused on medicine alone, or should we go to, you know, environmental monitoring, energy? Lastly also is that, what is it that we need to do to also bring more industry linkages to us? Right, we're starting to see that now a little bit, but it's still very low. It's still highly academic at the moment. There are Marie Curie programs. Should there be more internships and placements by the industry to allow us to attract more younger generation? And also, how should these young researchers approach these fields, given that these disciplines are also different? Is it basically going to be charged and directed by the supervisor, whatever expertise and interest that they have? What if someone comes along and say, I have an interest in bacteria, calcium signaling? What would actually happen? Is it that, you know, they just have to find the right supervisors to actually lead them? And how important is it that wet lab should also play a role as well, so that they'll also have multiple different skill sets when they actually complete the degrees to go out and then, you know, form their own lab? I mean, should we, there's a competition called iGEM. It's held every year in Boston. It allows, you know, different groups to genetically engineer machines for specific type of applications. You enter into this competition, and there's different categories, you know, from high school to undergrad to postgrad. Should we foster that a little bit more? Have more themes around molecular communications to widen up the scope a little bit? Or get into even biohacking, do-it-yourself synthetic biology? Is that the way we want to actually grow this area, right? So these are all the different types of challenges and questions I'm sure most of you would have, or even other questions as well. And these are the panelists that you see here, sitting here. Ashgar Khan from University of Cambridge, Ilanko Balasingham from Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Goksel Misrali from Kiel University, and Michael Barros from TSSG WIT. So each person is going to present only 5 minutes, and then after that we'll open the floor. Starting with you, Ashgar.
Okay, thank you, Sasi. Unfortunately, I do not have any answer to all these questions. I will further populate the questions and the challenges, and I will not be passing any good news for all the young researchers here. Sorry about that. So really the question still remains, who's the young researcher? There are many definitions. I dug out the internet and tried to find some official and non-official definitions. The first one is similar to what we have been thinking, like PhD students and postdoc. I mean, it makes sense, right? The second one is from Vision Research, kind of European institution funded by European Commission. Researchers within the first 10 years, but who have not yet obtained their PhD degrees. So this is called, these guys are called young researchers. The third one is like researchers who obtained their PhD no longer than 12 years ago. So I missed that definition with a 1 year, so I'm no longer a young researcher. So, but there is some overlapping of these definitions, but I think it is safe to go with the understanding of course, undergrads, right, part of research, masters, PhD students, and the postdocs. We can safely say that these guys are the young researchers. Or like fresh faculty members could be also, if they're new entering this field, they could be also considered within the context of molecular communication as young researchers. Young researchers are very important for us. I mean, thinking about that, we have a lot of invested in them. They can introduce novel and breakthrough ideas out of the box compared to us, like being a member of Jurassic Park. And they're basically the future of science in the future. But unfortunately, the first problem with the young researchers is that we have many of them. We have more than what we need, maybe, but not in our field. That's good news. Maybe that's the only good news that I can pass here. So this is some data from US. Unfortunately, the situation is worse in Europe. You can look into any of the axes here. This is annual number of PhDs granted, cumulative number, and basically the blue line are the PhDs awarded or granted, and the yellow line is the available faculty positions. You can see it's 1 to 8, 1 to 9 of the awarded PhDs. There is corresponding available faculty positions. So there's a huge mismatch. If you look into the Europe, you can. By the way, I can share all these slides with you, and you can go through the source of this information. If you look into Europe, it's more competitive. In UK, only 3.5% of the PhDs get a permanent research position. Okay. Can I shout like this? Okay, thank you. I don't want to stand there. Okay, so and out of these 3.5%, only less than 5 out of 1,000 people become professors. Okay, not encouraging. This is a general situation, and I do not think that this is better than that in our field. But in our field, it's kind of interdisciplinary, and there will be hopefully many more opportunities along the way. Please do not give up. Okay, we will be there to help you guys to pass through all these hassles. And it looks like all the young researchers know that there is this problem. They acknowledge that. And this is a very recent paper from Nature. When the young researchers are asked, how long are you going to be doing your postdoc until you find a permanent position, the answer, or the people who answered that they will be staying as a postdoc more than 3 years is basically, look into this purple one. 3 to 6 years and more than 6 years, it's kind of more than 60%. Even more than 20% of the young researchers in Europe saying that they may stay 6 years, more than 6 years, as a postdoc until they find permanent position. It's quite discouraging, right? It's pessimistic, I think. It shouldn't be that way. These are the common problems with the young researchers. And of course, on top of these, the main problem is always funding. I mean, this is exactly introduced by my postdoc and 2 of my PhD students. So I gathered all of these people, 15 people. Okay, I asked them, what are their concerns as a young researcher working in this field? This was the common problem that they honestly, frankly acknowledged. We were concerned about funding. So it means that we as the PIs need to find more funding in molecular communication, which is extremely difficult. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up now. So far, all these were the common challenges for all young researchers. As I said before, I'm not going to be answering any of the challenges Sasi posed. I'm going to add these ones, which I also acknowledge, but basically stated by my people, who are all, by all of these 3 definitions, young researchers, okay? They acknowledge that it's extremely difficult to adapt to this young and extremely interdisciplinary field. There are not many papers to read in this field to start with, okay? So they need to go into different disciplines, which is, which takes courage, basically, to do that. They need to be excellent in both theoretical and experimental understanding. We have been doing all these theoretical abstract stuff, nanomachine here, sending molecules, diffusion channels, this and that. But as I see today, experimentation is going along in a very strong way, as Ryan said, extremely fantastic work, and also all these microfluidic people like Giacomo and Andrea. So I think I found a killer app for you guys, because I saw that Ryan was extremely excited in explaining his work. I have never seen any other young researcher explaining like information theoretical modeling of synapse, blah, blah. I mean, my people at least, so excited. So at least there is this killer application that the young guys can use it to attach to this field, right? I don't know how else that could be used.
Function coffee.
Sorry? Okay. Another challenge that was stated by my people that they feel more insecure in terms of career path, because they do not see much positions advertised in the molecular communications, and I acknowledge that. So not many easy applications to motivate, so that was like an answer to your killer application quest. So we need to develop experimental test beds and demos. So I mean, we need to somehow push for more faculty positions, so this is homework for us kind of senior people, so to say. In our environment, we need to push this, get more grants, create more opportunities for postdocs, etc. Very limited, almost no link with industry, so we need to run after the industry, even though they do not give money. We need to affiliate them to our research. I'm trying to do it right now. It wasn't possible in my previous institution, but I'm trying to do it right now in Cambridge. I think it will be possible. So we need to really push for that. This is why we don't get any money. Some numbers. These are the publications in molecular communications and nanonetworks. Okay, just one more minute. That we can dig out from the Web of Science, kind of excluding all other related fields, okay, like biophysics and all. These are kind of papers having title or keyword, molecular communications or nanonetworks, okay? This is something you can imagine from 2005 to 2016. But if you look into the distribution of the people who are actually working in this field, or actually, publishing these papers, only 17% are PhD students. Very, very, very small. I mean, if you combine PhD and postdocs, 27%. Still low number, in my opinion. And this needs to be improved. So we need to encourage youngsters. We need to, really say that, don't worry, don't be afraid. Just come and work in this very exciting field. If you look into the authorship, because there might be many papers by a single guy, etc., or the other way around. If you look into, again, the same number of papers, 32% is the authorship of all these papers, okay? So if you check this as a PhD students only, this is just 16%, something like that. So this needs to really improve. So these are my final remarks. I do not think that we can really foster this field with senior people only, right? We need to really bring the young researchers. We need to increase the mobility, even though there is no money. I mean, we need to be open-minded to that, especially over multidisciplinary research labs. We can create a database repository on evolution of this field. It is needed. And this might be a crazy idea, but I have some solid ideas how to do this, young researcher community. When we have time, we can talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajga. So next will be Ilanko. Please.
So I'm going to take a slightly different approach or different way of conveying my message here. I actually started my career with a startup company after finishing my PhD. That was almost 20 years ago, so I'm not a young researcher anymore. But interesting actually is that these 4 years that I was in a startup company with 2 other classmates, and this was about the previous version of MMS, and at the time we didn't even have a handset that could receive a video or image to a mobile phone, but we were envisioning that we would be able to do that. We had a solution, and integrating with search engines. One of the first search engines actually came out from Norway, was part of Yahoo at the time, before Google came up. So that's how things started. Then I thought about going back to academia and doing some academic work. Luckily, the company went fairly well, and Microsoft bought the company for $1 billion American dollars. Company still in Norway, but doing other things for Microsoft now. I think, to be honest about our field in molecular communications, we need to sort of look into creating sustainable, both in academia and also in industry. Think whether you could tap into some of the new ideas and work with other people and try to create companies. I think traditional companies in our area, I think coming from wireless communications, devices and everything, they may not be sort of pushing this so far because they are pretty much basically in a very comfortable zone. So young scientists like you really have wonderful ideas. You should maybe go for it. So I'm going to talk. My talk is basically trying to bring this towards a little bit more applications. And especially I'm working on medical technology now with devices. And I'm interested to see whether I could make things much smaller and whether I could also communicate. And the device will be, hopefully could be implanted maybe and can last for many years, you know, like a pacemaker device or something. I will come back and show you some examples. There are some programs already available. This is two programs, one in Europe, the other one in the US. This is for brain type of applications. And there is IEEE actually has a brain initiative going on. So this is actually part of the discussions we are having in IEEE brain initiative. And what are the important issues there, scientific topics and everything. Now it's a little bit related only to brain. So I don't want to go through everything here. You know, we are talking about things to be smaller, and we would like to sort of measure single cells. And can we have implants maybe? We could be able to communicate in a distance-wise and so forth. And then when you have this data, what can you do with them? So it may be some kind of big data, machine learning type of issues also coming up. And then of course there's a big industry behind that. You know, is very much interested in these things. So this is actually connecting pharmaceutical companies with electronics and see whether this would be the next type of generation of devices that can combine both drugs and electronics and could be able to signal. And in this concept, this is very well known, something called brain-machine interface, and people are interested to have these type of devices so that you could target several applications, everything from Parkinson's, paralysis, to maybe Alzheimer, and how this could be sort of useful in that context. So these are maybe some of the applications that you could consider. And this is pretty much, the issues that I wrote here is basically coming from communications. What are the rates that we are discussing and so forth, if you go all the way down to a single cell. From brain, there's another big industry. So brain is actually around 5 billion American dollars, maybe 10 billion American dollars. Pacemaker alone industry is $15 billion. So this is a huge industry. And what we are doing now is that this is actually the normal pacemaker. So you have leads going inside, and you are going to sort of measure the impedance or electrical activities there. Based on that, you make a decision whether you want to pace. So that's for the pacemakers when the heart is moving very slow. If the heart is moving very fast, you want to give a shock so that you can resynchronize the heart. And in this case, in this project that we are having, it's an European project called YPEC, we are looking at how to develop the next generation pacemakers. It's going to be like small capsules. Again, we are not in the nanoscale. This is in the micro scale, so that we can implant them. We can have many of them, so that we can have improved the function of the heart. And in this project, we are having a student who is looking into how to excite single cells in this manner so that we can have sub-threshold voltages, so that this device, for example, could last 10 years, maybe 15 years, or 20 years. Now, if we can prove that sub-threshold voltage will be interesting and can last for longer, companies are very much interested. So we are working with companies like Medtronic. Sorin is an European company. So these are the two main companies who are actually having the pacemakers or the market worldwide. And if you can, coming from electrical engineering, if you can work with them, it would be fantastic. So there are a lot of opportunities actually there. And I think I will also mention this. This was a big research grant that we were targeting. Unfortunately, we missed it. A 10-year program. Again, what we are interested is to see whether we could design cells. So this is something like a designer cell. It's an engineered cell using synthetic biology. And how these type of cells could be communicating with small implants that will be superficially implanted. Hopefully this information could be transmitted wireless to the internet. So it's something called, Internet of Bio-Nano Things, and how to do this actually is describing the whole research program here. It's something like a 10 years research program and really targeting applications, whether we really can do that. That's pretty much important. Because without the applications, you don't get the funding. Unfortunately, basic research funding is sort of, pretty much limited. I think maybe in big universities like in Cambridge or MIT or Harvard, they may have some small amount of money that could sort of spend on that. Applications with basic science, bringing into different groups. So for example, people working in electronics with synthetic biology and electrical engineers like me, I think it will be fantastic, with also clinicians working with us. There are some interesting initiatives going on in Europe right now. So I mentioned to you, there was we have two flagship programs, one in brain, another one in graphene. And now, last year, there was an open call to get new topics, and they want to create new flagships. And as I say it, the topics that we are discussing here in molecular communication in conjunction with fields from biology, material science, electronics, everything is kind of embedded into different type of ideas coming from different groups. I don't want to go all these things, but I think it's quite interesting that we are not alone. People in other fields are thinking more or less like us, and they are trying to create certain things using knowledge that's going to come from you guys. So I'm optimistic to say that in this way. Of course, if you look at the faculty positions, of course, it's not growing or it's not sort of picking up. I hope that this will happen. It looks like we are in a time where interesting things are happening. If you take, for example, the field that I come from, like wireless communications, mobile communications, if you look at the faculty positions there, in 2000 or 2005, we sort of grow up, and last 10 years, sort of, they're not hiring so many people there anymore. It's become so matured, and the industry sort of, running the programs nowadays. Not so much in the academic programs. But these programs are pretty much targeting with academia and also with industry, hopefully with industry. And I believe that there will be interesting opportunities both in academia and also industry. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ilanko. Thank you. Thanks. No, it's we can leave the clapping to the end. I think it's no, we don't have time. That's the reason. No, it's good to see some nice examples from industry as well, right? Some that has the potential of this area. So the next slightly younger person here is Göksel. Please come up.
Thanks, everyone. My name is Göksel. I'm a computer scientist, and I spent some time in software engineering in Austria, and then decided to do a PhD. So I did a PhD related to synthetic biology, and a postdoc at Newcastle University, and I'm about to start as a lecturer at Kiel University. So I'm interested in computational design of biological systems and using automation. Well, this process is, of course, very challenging. Biological systems can be very complex, they can be noisy, nonlinear, and data about systems can be incomplete and based on several parameters, multidimensional. And these systems have huge design space anyway, very difficult to engineer. And to create predictable applications, we need to consider many types of data about biological components, interactions, and so on. And the design process may require expertise in many different areas. So I don't know exactly what kind of training should be given to younger generation of researchers to tackle different challenges, but I think it's important to draw their attention first. And interdisciplinary projects can be a key in this aspect. One good example is International Genetic Engineering Machine Competition. As mentioned, it started as a design course in MIT in 2003. Now thousands of students participate in this competition. And many of these students then take further education opportunities, doing PhDs, for example. I myself participated as a team member in 2009 as part of Newcastle's team. Previously, I had no wet lab experience, and over the course of the summer, I ended up doing molecular cloning, learning pipetting techniques, and my other friends were learning about computation modeling, simulation, a little bit of programming, and we all had fun. And 4 of these students from my team then decided to do PhDs in related areas as well. So it was a very good example, I think. Another example that I can give here is the biathlon competition that we organized last year as part of the International Workshop on Biodesign Automation. It was the first of this series, and we had 5 teams competing. So we asked them some challenging problems and gave them a single day with a set of defined resources. Of course, a single day is not enough to solve all these problems, but nevertheless, it was useful to attract students to challenging problems. For example, one of the questions was to extend a data standard to represent multicellular genetic circuits. There are many companies already interested in the development of applications. Clearly, as the number of these applications increase, it will attract more researchers. So this application might be medicine, bioremediation, bioenergy, DNA computing, and so on. But the problem is that this cycle at home is through manual applications, which may take years of research time and millions of euros, which may not be feasible for companies. So we need the ability to design large-scale applications in a cost and time-effective manner. So we need to develop this tooling, which can then be reused again and again in the development of many other applications. I think there are many opportunities to borrow from electronic design automation companies, particularly the development of CAD tools. High-level languages are very important. And reproducibility of biological design is a huge issue at the moment. I'll give a talk on Thursday afternoon about these issues. So the development of data standards and capturing designs, the choice that we make when designing, and metadata to describe those designs is very important. And equally, creating data repositories and therefore sharing huge amount of efforts that go into designing applications is very important. And there are also IP issues sometimes, such as patenting designs, patenting new technologies, and sometimes the use of an existing technology in a new context is a problem. And we also need to think about ethical and social issues, and we need to communicate with the regulatory bodies in advance in order to bring new products to the market timely. And I think if we can make advances in the development of this framework, this tooling, we can then find partnerships with industry easy in the future. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Gokso. It's great to see examples from synthetic biology, and in particular those list of companies as well. It's actually quite interesting to see their interest in synthetic biology. Maybe that's the attraction we need for molecular communication. I don't know. So the next speaker is the youngest out of all of us, Michael Bars. He actually just completed his PhD, so he's going to come and briefly talk about his experience in this area. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Sazi. As Sazi said, I might be the slightly young of the group. What I want to present here is my experience coming from a telecommunication background, computer science background, doing my PhD in molecular communications and what resulted out of that, right? So in my PhD, we're interested into analyzing cellular processes and studying, seeing how the cells interact with each other, what's the impact of that, and translate that into information communication technology metrics. So we understand also using ICT or with the molecular communications view how these systems work and biological principles work. So as you probably are figuring, we had to dig down deep into the biology, understand very well. And for example, we have this system where we can collect real data and then do models out of that. And we can fit our, basically in the regards of cellular communication, it's what called diffusion reaction models. And these models are well enough validated for us to use in a simulation environment and further build all these simulation framework and so on and so on. So here, I worked with 3 types of cells. I worked with excitable cells, non-excitable cells, and hybrid cells. So an example of an excitable cell could be neurons or cariomocytes. An example of non-excitable cells would be aptillion, and an example of a hybrid cell would be, for example, astrocyte. So we wanted basically to model first the intracellular properties of the cell, then the intercellular property of the cell, basically the diffusion between gap junctions and their stochastic processes. So we can fully analyze this and convert everything into information metrics. Here, towards the end of our PhD, we're noticing that we have a lot of knowledge, but maybe we needed to put some meaning on this knowledge. And that meaning we need to look at some applications. And one of the applications we're looking towards, it was nanomedicine. So that generated an idea that was further explored and proposed as a follow-up project, as a postdoc fellowship. And we were successful in this application, where we are looking at the, let's say, 3-way communications between presynaptic neuron, postsynaptic neuron, and astrocytes. As the information flows between presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron, there needs to be enough glial transmitters between these channels in order to the synapses propagate really well, so to speak. And the glial transmitters here are being produced, or let's say being delivered by this third cell, which is called astrocyte. There is, of course, a lot of interplays between, for example, the postsynaptic neuron and the astrocytes that impact on the amount of glial transmitters. So one type of problem that we wanted to look is in the neurodegeneration or neurodegenerative disease. Particularly looking at Alzheimer's, we could see that levels of calcium would decrease in these astrocytes and then impact on the glial transmitter channel. Then we asked, can we at least theoretically control this communication channel to suppress or to give a constant input of glial transmitters and then regulate synaptic level? That was the application. And we introduced a control function, which is a feed-forward feedback control function, where we can, if we have particular or precise information about the IP3 levels, which is the protein that's responsible for stimulating calcium production, and also calcium levels, we can create a measure of this protein that can be fed into the cell and then regulating calcium oscillation. So basically, it's a proposal of an elimination of oscillation of oscillation of calcium inside the astrocytes. So developing all that is actually a very, let's say, eye-opening experience. And I attribute that to the interdisciplinary, let's say, property of this research. So you might ask, why did you move to molecular communications? First of all, I knew nothing before I saw an advertisement of an email to join, for example, SASI's group. And what really interested me was the cutting-edge topic that was being proposed. Nano networks inside the body, possibly, hopefully. And then that really triggered me, because I really want, as a building up a career as a researcher, to be really on that level of cutting-edge research. The transition was actually also very pleasant, because when you come from telecommunications, somehow you're so busy with so many problems in our research areas that we sometimes don't have, for example, the luck to look at all the problems. And why do I say lucky? Because sometimes all the problems in all the different areas might actually inspire us to develop solutions for our own problems. And why did you study molecular communications? So, as coming towards my PhD, we've seen the applications, and we were very motivated into building more and more solutions that could be applied to nanomedicine at molecular scale a priori. And then looking now, having this whole experience, we're more confident that molecular communications has indeed like a very good, let's say, contribution to interdisciplinary problems. And that's one of my advice for young researchers. So if you're starting molecular communications research, of course, understanding biology is very important. Understanding what your problem is very, very important. What's the limitations of that, what's the implications of that. But also keep an eye on multi-scale problems where by solving one problem, you'd solve not only, for example, a biological problem, but a telecommunication problem. You'd both make contributions by developing new communication systems, of course, to telecommunications, and then by looking at applications such as nanomedicine, you'd contribute to systems biology and so on.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Michael. Okay, so that's the end of all the presentations. So now we're going to open the floor to, oh, do you want to clap? Yeah, sure. Long-awaited clap. All right, we're going to open the floor now to questions. So anyone would like to start? Edward, yes, sure.
May I?
Yeah.
How much time do we have?
Well, yeah, we're running a bit out of time, but we can extend a bit, I think, right? So.
I would like to listen to young PhD students or young postdocs asking about questions about the future career, but I would like to flip the question into what is common both to consolidated researchers and faculties and students, which is educational programs.
Yes.
So educational, we haven't touched this issue, which I think it's, if not the basement of research, is at the backbone of a researcher, a future researcher. Now, we all know that research, it's an interdisciplinary topics, the fertile overlap between two or more disciplines. But educational programs, PhD programs, have to be multidisciplinary, out of which you can mentor research. Now, multidisciplinarity is a double-edged sword. We know that by just combining disciplines, just by juxtaposing disciplines, we probably end up in a Tower of Babel. Instead, I'm asking the panelists, if we agree that there are some disciplines to combine in an educational PhD program, whether it's engineering, systems design, wireless engineering, whether it's synthetic biology or the medicine applications, which topics, which percentage, which subsets of the knowledge, in which sequence we should combine them to have a proper educational program out of which better research could come.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Anyone want to take that first?
Very difficult question.
Yeah, very difficult. That's why
just your insights. Just your insights. And perhaps related to the topic of the tools.
You see, yeah, it was very interesting question, very tough question. But now, if you, just before the panelists answer this question, if you look at some of the presentations today and tomorrow, right, we have small aspects of molecular biology, microfluidics, this is more materials, nanotechnology, right? Even if you go even as far as medicine as well. The question now will be, is this dependent on the research that stream they want to do? Or do we have a set of electives and then people just choose those electives as part of their PhD program? Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. The panelists, what do you think?
I mean, I don't think that we might be able to define. Okay, I think I'll go. I don't think it might be possible to define a one set of distribution of the subjects that will fit to all different titles which will go into the nanonetworking. Like I had like several people working all in the nanonetworking, but few of them were, like in my ERC project, they were doing this nervous system analysis and cutting like earthworms in the laboratory environment because their, spinal cord, so to say, is very similar to us. So they were taking courses from neurophysiology, neurology, School of Medicine, blah, blah, blah. I had other people, they were also doing molecular communications, nanonetwork, but they were getting several physics courses and they had nothing to do with School of Medicine courses. So it depends on the, molecular communication of nanonetworks is extremely huge an interdisciplinary field, right? Like very similar to sensor networking in a sense, right? Well, what is sensor networking? It depends on the
But we have all been doing that in an ad hoc manner. I'm trying to ask for a structured approach. Yeah.
Yeah, a decade ago. So I think it depends on that. It depends on the problem domain that you're working on, and it needs to be decided with advisor and the student together in an independent manner. I think there's a barrier in this, in my understanding, and then I'll shut up. Some programs are quite rigid. They say that you need to take these courses, and then a few electives so that you can graduate with PhD. And that is an extreme barrier. I know there are many countries that are doing this, but I think to be able to encourage PhD students to go through this way, by also taking courses, all the courses should be open and
Did these students of yours themselves cut the worm themselves after doing these
Yeah,
courses?
yeah.
Really? So after they went and got this
Yeah,
training, they came and
yeah,
did this
yeah.
themselves? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
interesting.
cannot cut for the time being monkeys and all, but they can cut earthworms.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
To try to be constructive, don't you think, and I will shut up, don't you, Özgür, don't you think that related to what you presented, what's common out of these seemingly diverse disciplines could be a central modeling language or a simulation tool that would be, do you think that's a possibility?
But, okay,
Or that should be a component of that educational program at least?
Yeah, might be, but I cannot still name a single module or single course that should be definitely in all the programs or all molecular communication related research students.
But
At least I cannot name. Maybe there is, but
maybe a small component in each of the type of course,
Yeah.
isn't it, right?
But
Like
yeah.
synthetic biology might have
Exactly,
something,
exactly.
fluidic might have something. Do the other panelists want to answer that first
Yeah.
before we move to the next question?
I think the approach might be changed a bit. Rather than saying exactly math, exactly physics or computers, I think we should focus on engineering approach, design-oriented approach, which may require sometimes a bit of mathematical knowledge, sometimes modeling, sometimes purely biology. But if you have teams with different skills, it's easier. I don't think one person should know about everything. I think research centers should have teams. They all know some basics about that research, but some of them will be more skilled than others in different areas.
If I might add to that shortly, I think that inspired us at the beginning in this community of the Circle project. In biology, as interesting as it is, everything is about characterization, whereas in synthetic biology, it's in a sense design-oriented. That resonated very much to our engineering discipline. So that allowed, whether we're doing a modeling or a tool-based characterization, the design-oriented approach, that it's unique to
Sure.
this problem.
Okay, yep, Adriani?
Yeah, very quickly. Coming out of the experience of the transformation of drug development at the European level, the Innovative Medicines Initiative and its, predecessors, which was the New Safe Medicines Faster. And I was at the transition there in the committee. The first thing and this was not a new field, it was just a new approach, because drug development has been there forever. If we want to build up a new field, first we need some patience. It's a long-time investment. So the identification of the bottlenecks, it's the very, very best thing, and a consensus among the Molcom community, the more senior people, what the bottlenecks we need to achieve, to go through in the next 5 years, let's say. And I don't agree, I'm sorry, with the double major. The mere master's is the interface that will bring up the incentives and the excitement in the new PhD and the new leaders. So my suggestion would be define bottlenecks very well. Bottleneck, it's a sub-discipline perhaps. What needs to be done in microfluidics, what needs to be done in drug delivery, what needs to be done in synthetic biology, whatever. Then design small courses and decide which universities the next 5 years will be the best to convince their leader there to establish a new Master of Science, program. So in the Innovative Medicines Initiative, we came up with toxicology specialists, because pharmacologists and pharmacists knew a little bit of everything, more or less, the engineer now. So had master programs in the toxicology expert, the efficacy expert, the validation expert, the biomarker expert that was at the master, and new PhD programs will come, in 4 or 5 years after that. So that's just a suggestion. If we really, want to get, and deliverable out of this today, perhaps, create a steering committee, a working group, an ad hoc committee or something, to go towards that.
That's not a bad idea, because this whole area, because it's so multidisciplinary, a lot of people get very scared when they get into it, and because especially the more traditional comms engineering or computer science. But one very good example of this multidisciplinary that has worked really, really well is actually bioinformatics. In the early days when bioinformatics came into computer scientists were really fearful of it. Today, I don't even have to tell you how successful bioinformatics is. It's spread so successfully in different industries, So maybe that is, and there's so many master's degree in bioinformatics you can find in every university. Maybe that's the way to go,
Maybe clarify that double major thing. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's not a definite replacement of what you have been proposing. I totally agree with you. But I see that at the undergraduate level, it is extremely difficult to restructure the programs. They're all mainline, electrical engineering, computer science, this and that. And some universities, like my previous institution, allows students to do double major, like electrical engineering and medicine, electrical engineering and bio. It might be a useful, way of circumventing these problems. That was just an idea, not to replace what you've been proposing. I definitely agree with your suggestion.
Maybe even at the undergrad level, start with a set of electives, maybe. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm going to launch in the next Lent term. I mean, basically the spring term, Internet of Nanobio things, which will be open to undergraduates.
Sure.
Definitely, that's
Great.
A very short reaction.
Yeah.
If I may, a very short reaction. Yeah. I fully support your comment. There is one risk, though. I come to think, the risk of hyper-specialization. We all know that a PhD has to have a very clear focus, but in the educational program, we cannot come up with a myriad hyper-specialized programs. Instead, I'm suggesting that we create, this community perhaps, with the steering committee, we create a multidisciplinary program that could leverage already existing programs in different institutions and settings. So that program would be a path, an itinerary. So you go a few months to get synthetic biology, medicine, engineering, and then you compose your path. We don't need to create hyper-specialized
Are you talking at
programs, but paths, perhaps.
Especially at the undergraduate level.
Definitely.
At Cambridge, your engineering, it's electrical and mechanical and everything the same until the third year, I think.
Yeah.
So that's a story here. How could you have in biology? Well, they have not even specialized in engineering per se.
But I mean,
Just for
many universities are structured like that. I mean, all of my previous institutions were totally different. So that's why I was
Not all of them. Berkeley, for instance, you compose out of the
That's an
constellation of electives, you compose your program.
Not everyone is doing that.
UC Berkeley, you have a constellation of electives. They have hardcore undergrad studies, and at the end, they crystallize their program with picking up an ad hoc selection of electives out of a massive group of them.
But it could also be done this way, right? I don't know. I mean, right? Why not? You just,
But at the end,
yeah. Can we get other people to please to talk as well? Yeah, Giacomo.
In my opinion, it's very important to decide what is the level. In my opinion, going to the undergraduate is not a good strategy for one reason. Because, I mean, suppose that your daughter, I have a daughter, comes to you and say, what do you want to, and say, Pap, hey dad, give me the money, I want to go to the university and study nanocommunications. And I ask her, well, what is the industry? Yeah. Okay, where then you will find a job in which company? And she say, there are no applications so far, but hopefully in 5-10 years there will be some. I mean, I don't think this is an investment that families will do. And I don't think if there is an industry, even students will decide to do something like that. PhD most probably is the lowest level we can decide to go, because when you are at the undergraduate level, but even master level, you see that in 2 years you will be out in the market and you want to find a job. Then afterwards you start seeing, wow, research is great, maybe I can do something, and then you go to an advisor, and the advisor is crazy enough to have some topics on the nano networks.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying the minimum level is at the PhD level already?
I think so.
What do you think, panelists?
I talk too much.
Yeah.
To some extent, I do agree with you. I think because the foundation that we can provide each within the electrical engineering or HPT science or whatever, that there is a strong foundation that we have. Actually, we are able to span different fields when we have this strong foundation, and this strong foundation actually comes from the undergraduate programs that we have. So when I see, for example, biomedical engineering, which is also quite multidisciplinary area, bringing both physics, engineering, and also clinical medicine. And they have tried to create different programs, and mainly in Europe, I think it is in the master level. I know that maybe some universities, maybe in Europe, also in the United States, also have in the bachelor level programs, but mainly in the master's level, and then they go to the PhD. I have a colleague from Japan who has actually running a big center there in Yokohama National University. This is actually combining clinical medicine. Clinical medicine is very specialized field with ICT, but only in PhD level.
Yeah, what I meant.
So that's what I think. This field, it's kind of emerging now. It will be interesting to see how this is actually able to grow. But I think people coming from different areas. So let's say that a person who has taken biology in the undergraduate program is quite interested to learn a little bit about electrical engineering in the master level, maybe taking some elective courses, so that they can get a master degree, maybe a joint degree maybe, so that they also have a biology background and also can span field in electrical engineering or engineering as such, and vice versa. So I think that would be the way that we can create and bridge the gap, and we can communicate. Now we have the big problem actually is to have a common language. The language I speak, it's very difficult for a clinical medicine, because I work in a hospital, in a clinical medicine department there. And working with physicians, they speak entirely differently when they speak from an engineering point of view. They don't understand so much. So I spent 3-4 years just to understand and try to communicate with them. Then I was able to sort of define the problems and how to sort of handle them. And now actually my group actually has people coming from biology and also clinical medicine. So I have physicians also in my group. So it took some time actually to sort of create this common language environment and a learning environment that each of us can flourish from that. But my strong is that I have very strong background maybe in electrical engineering, and then my colleagues have strong background in different areas, and then also we can do this in the postgraduate level. Maybe that's the way to go for it, I guess.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Sure.
I was meaning is basically that up to the master degree, I think you need to nail the master degree name to the job market. This was my opinion.
Yes. In the same way bioinformatics did it, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I definitely
yeah, that's true.
I might be even more conservative because I'm realistic, or you can call me pessimistic, I don't know. I'm not saying this is correct, this should be the way it is, but it is the way it is. So when we interview, candidates, right, for faculty positions in our institutions, like electrical engineering, we first check, if it is PhD in electrical engineering or, relevant or computer engineering or blah blah, and then right. I mean, PhD in molecular communications. Let's name it for the time being. It is not ready. We are not there yet. So I take your word that we need to be patient. Definitely, we need to first build up and improve the domain field and show people that this field is not some fantasy coming out of people's minds. So it is important. It is necessary, and then people see that it should self-justify it, and then we may. I mean, bioinformatics is an excellent example. It may reach that level, but not now. I mean, I don't think, even at the master's level, master's in molecular communication, think about it. That guy will have a problem, or that lady will have a problem finding a PhD position next time. May have a problem, right? I mean, think about in the realistic.
It's a very positive outlook for all the young people out there. So.
I'm
just kidding. No, you're right.
My students to go with the mainstream, electrical engineering, computer science, biomedical,
Yes.
your degrees,
Sure.
but work, whatever you want to work on,
Yes.
equip yourself with all multidisciplinary notions and understanding nature, and then go for it.
Great. Just before you waste it, I'll just ask Shreyas first. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just want to share my personal thing with, when you mentioned biomedical engineering, I was going to give that example because just over 10 years ago when I was starting undergrad, I think in early 2000, biomedical engineering was something that was picking up. And there's a Time magazine, like tissue engineering being the future job. And so at that time, biomedical engineering, it was in the same dilemma as to how it's a new program which is combining all these different fields. And so where I went at Rutgers in New Jersey, when I entered the biomedical engineering program, I think what was interesting was in biomedical engineering, again, there's mechanical, electrical, there's biological, so tissue engineering. So what was done was in the first 2-3 years, you get the core classes. So in that, I had MATLAB, which is like the core programming that everyone learns. And then you had electives also as an undergrad. But then in the last year, you had an option to select either biomechanical engineering, bioelectrical, or tissue engineering. So like if you went to tissue engineering, you would take organic chemistry, which someone in devices would not take, right? Someone who's interested in that part. So what that did was there was a core fundamental where if you just go mainstream electrical, for example, you wouldn't get the biological knowledge. Whereas for some reason, due to your experience and the people you're with, maybe in the master's, PhD level, you had electrical, but you got intrigued by bio, then you happen to come into that field. But that's based on probability to do that. But if you foster at an undergrad level, I think one way is through this type of dual where you have a core and then you have maybe even if it's the last year, it piques your attention. Now that's dependent on PIs who are available for research, because I felt that my knowledge, I went into nanomaterials after that, which was non-existent. That was something that was also developing. But because there's research available at the undergrad level, there's programs like Oresti Foundation and undergrad level research programs through which, professors are catering to that. So I think that gives you a real base as to what you'd go on for masters to do, at which point now with molecular communication, I guess defining really what is molecular communication. Just how biomedical engineering had to define it. Molecular communication, what does it encompass? I think maybe that is one step, but catering at a younger kind of undergrad level to masters would push someone rather than probability-wise coming into that field. But just
pretty much guided by whoever is the professor who has some projects, let's say, for example, or honors or masters, and then, yes, sure.
And then I continue on with the professor in nanomaterials to go on to PhD for that.
Anyone want to comment on that?
Just quickly say, at Newcastle University, for example, we have some examples, undergraduate students starting directly to PhDs, and the only reason for that was to do perfect projects. So they were exposed, so they tasted what kind of research they liked, and they wanted to carry on. And it's useful to advertise what's available out there for them to taste, increase the interest, and if they're happy, they'll continue.
Sure, yeah, great. Wacy, yep.
Just a quick question. What Oscar said really resonated with me. I have a PhD student who just finished who wants to be a postdoc in molecular communications. Do you know what he said to me? He said, I really regret doing molecular communications with you as a PhD student because, in a very nice way, but there's just no faculty positions, no postdoc positions available. Unless everyone gets ERC grants in molecular communications, this is not a scalable model currently from a financial point of view, right? As you pointed out, most papers are written by faculty staff.
So you're saying it's a hit and miss pretty much at the moment?
I mean, unless we can see pathways and mechanisms where we can transform this transition from PhD to faculty or postdoctoral positions, I feel like if we just start building a wider pyramid below, such as masters and more PhDs, you're just going to clog up this bottleneck more. And I feel like we should answer that top question first before we build up a wider base, right?
True. Yeah, so it is quite hit and miss, really, isn't it? Either you do really well and then you shoot up and get all the ERCs. And if it's just a near miss, then it's tough. I mean, you're a great example, right?
I wrote it there, like push for grants. I mean, this is what I'm trying to do. I mean, this is our PI's work, and so that we will have more opportunities for the youngsters, I think.
Yes. Pietro, go ahead.
So, bioinformatics has grown because there was a market for DNA sequences. And the DNA sequences were important for classification, for other things. So we should follow the market. For instance, if let's say, liquid biopsies in the blood, or to separate a small amount of, say, chemokines or other molecules in the blood, or separation of cells will become very important for the market. This will drive molecular communication applications, and this we will also turn into positions.
Pretty much application driven, right? Just like in bioinformatics. I don't know, Adriani, you wanted to say something?
Well, just something came to my mind. How many of you academic, from the lecturer and up level, his lab or department, name is molecular communications, and that's 100% of his research on molecular communications. I mean, I know Edward, he's doing other things, right? Besides just because that's an issue to consider, and another, coming back to whatever Leo just mentioned. If you Google molecular communications, okay, Google Scholar molecular communications, 98% is purely biological systems in terms of signaling and intracellular and biological. So these things have to be, so molecular communication, that's what you find. I mean, so 97% of the papers, if you Google, and look, I was looking, for molecular communication, is purely signal transduction and molecular signaling and interactomes and, systems biology sometimes. So coming back, to the automation, cytokine, it's the interface, there, how you define, the field is so unclear in people's mind, sometimes, that need really to consider those young people, when we come to the field, that we really all speak the same language when it comes to this issue. And you say you cannot have a molecular communication degree there, but the degree could be, in the specific subdiscipline, okay, the bottlenecks I stated before that have to be overcome, that would feed into that. So we need to take that into consideration.
This is a very important point. A reaction to that is, and before, as a preamble, I think that we are suffering with any emergent combination of disciplines suffers. So it's too early.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
So we always grow very small and emergent. Now, a reaction to Andriane. Well, molecular communication has existed for zillions of years and died. Now, in biology and in synthetic biology for many, many years, the working definition we consider in this community in Europe and the equivalent in US is bringing knowledge and modeling tools from ICT and EE into that to provide potentially a new insight that could help synthetic biologists to increase the performance. We're not inventing molecular communications, but that's new combination. That's the working principle of this group. But Tom, I have another.
Coming from the bioinformatics computational biology side, I actually completely agree with what you are saying. You suffer from a definition problem. Because when I heard your talks and you invited me to give a keynote, and then I looked at the different kinds of presentations here, well, you have to separate either communications with molecules from nanoscale stuff. And so the microfluidic stuff that I just saw here, that's simply discussing, okay, we want to do networking at a nano level scale.
Sure.
But it's nothing to do with molecules. So molecules is wrong in this type of completely. There's no molecules there.
That's true.
So if you want to call yourself molecular communication society and you want to introduce programs, it's essential, like you were saying, that people know what you mean. Bioinformatics had the advantage that people knew what it meant. Bioinformatics means data analysis of genomes, end of story.
Yes.
It's very, very direct, it's very targeted.
Sure.
Molecular communications, if I hear this and I see the program, it covers all areas that are nanoscale,
Right.
using molecules, not using molecules, doing telecom, having information theory, not having information theory. So you're suffering from this kind of definition problem.
I think your comment is very important. It might be that we could have flipped the program and talk about the roadmap today and then implications.
Sure.
We would have the working definition. Now, my reaction is consistent to what I was saying. We wanted to, this community wanted to bring methods and techniques from ICT and wireless communication.
But this is a problem.
Because that's a commonality. That's a commonality. Those techniques, whether it's applied at nanoscale between molecules into adjacent cells, or it goes into a large cyber-physical nanovirus system.
But you're assuming that biologists are not already doing exactly the same thing. They are doing the same thing. Systems biology, computational biology is exactly what you're talking about. It's bringing ICT. I mean, I don't know who I was talking to today, but I actually come from the artificial life community, which is more or less linked to what you guys want to do here. It's modeling, it's communication, it's cells. You had the minimal cell initiative like 10 years ago. You had networks, all this kind of stuff. I mean,
the only hope, I fully agree. The only hope is that perhaps some of the elaborated techniques we use in communications engineering, which are not just to describe, but to improve performance and to design new coding mechanisms.
If I can say something, just one minute. Sorry, no, if I could just say something, Tom. The original definition, please correct me if I'm wrong, of molecular communications was literally to send digital information using biological processes. It was beyond the modeling of just natural communication systems, which system biologists do. I think this is what the original definition of this field, would you not say?
So introduce new kinds of communication as the biological.
Exactly, artificial communication, effectively, that if you had nanomachines and you wanted to send information to other nanomachines, and they were sending it using digital bits, how would it be done?
So that they have to really, maybe find a better term to really say it's artificial nanoscale communication.
Sure, right.
Actually, there's a very difficult artificially assisted or enhanced. But before that, in order for these techniques that enhance or assist to be plausible, we wanted to understand molecular communications that already exist. That's a sequence. Of course.
Yeah.
But if you want to become, like, I feel this discussion is moving towards, like, how do we define ourselves as a new field? It's a new island everybody can flock to.
I think, the discussion somehow leaked that direction. I think there's no such issue here.
Yes.
To define the domain. I think domain is pretty much well defined. I think what I understand is nanoscale communications. We call it nanonetworks if you want to do multi-hub or whatever, infrastructure is networking. The medium and the transmission mechanisms could be molecules, could be first-order resonance energy transfer, could be calcium ion signaling, okay, could be quantum entanglement, you name it. Okay. Even just heat transfer, we had that. Tons of opportunities in that region. But the main problem domain name could be like bioinformatics. We can simply call it nanoscale communication or nanonetwork, whatever you want to call it. with tons of opportunities of applications. Regarding to the molecular communication, I definitely agree with you. So molecular communication has been done with some other fields in a very similar approach. But our idea and our initial motivation was totally different. As Sasi said, we wanted to come up with communication techniques as a communication engineers to be able to create nanoscale networks. Because there are these tons of nanosensors, nanoactuators, nanomachines basically, all these physicists and all engineers devising, right? But their capabilities were extremely limited. I mean, they envision all these fancy applications, and all these applications require 3 nanomachines to work together. So how are we going to do that? What is the first object? What is the first problem here? If you want to have 3 of us do something together, what is the problem? We need to communicate. So that was our initiating point. Okay. Of course, we are still learning from bioinformatics, all these different fields and all. At the same time, let me again shut up.
No, go ahead. No, you're doing well.
Like Eduard said, like as a specific example, in one of my projects, we were trying to answer this problem. How are we going to communicate these artificial nanomachines? But when we say nano networks, we understand at least. But I definitely think we should make everyone understand clearly with this wording.
Yes.
I get that suggestion very well. And for that reason, we were first looking into abstract models and cells and all. Then we decided that we need to look into nervous system, because there are tons of research done. Physiology, neurophysiology literature is very well mature, although there are tons of unknowns. With 2 objectives in mind. One is to extract design principles for this artificial neural network, so to say, okay, because we can learn.
The design.
Yeah. Yep. Second objective, which is more exciting to me, is that while we learn, we can also maybe map the communication failures to diseases, because we know that most of the diseases in the nervous system are communication failures. For example, multiple sclerosis is exactly the same problem from communication perspective as the loss of the insulator around the coaxial cable that we're using here. Interference problem, intersymbol interference. This naming has nothing to do with the synthetic biology or whatever. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? And we know how to solve it because it's already happening here, intersymbol interference.
Yes.
Maybe we might be able to bring the theories and techniques to the service of life scientists, you guys, so that you can use these in collaboration with us to solve the communication problem inside our body. So kind of closing the loop.
Yes,
so it's kind of a byproduct.
Yeah. Very good. Go, please, yeah.
So I fully agree, right? But
thank you.
But since the panel is about how to attract youngsters,
yes,
you have to make it clear to them.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to convince me. I'm here for interest. And
sure. I think
take your advice.
Sure. I think Tom, your concern is more marketing of this, really, right? To the wider.
Maybe a bit too strong.
Sure.
But I do it on purpose just to make.
I'm trying my best to give seminars everywhere, but
Just before I go to Wasey, Ryan, I think you had a question, please.
Yeah, I guess on the same vein, to what extent do you see wet lab and microfabrication, I guess the experience to be a motivator? Well, you brought up iGEM, and I found that wet lab work and microfabrication work tend to be a detractor to especially people with an ECE background. The idea of pipetting is novel for about an hour. The idea of fabricating microfluidics is cool for about a week. And unfortunately, the theoretical side is very interesting. However, without the data, it's very difficult to attract dollars, especially from industry. Our experience is you have to actually demonstrate a product rather than a model before you can actually get some dollars. So I think with that in mind, the wet lab work and the microfabrication work is important, and I found it to be a demotivator rather than an attractor of talent, especially at the undergraduate level. I was just wondering what your guys' experience was.
Interesting. So,
If I might react to that.
Yeah.
We know that there's no Leonardo da Vinci anymore. I don't think that
there's no single researcher alone, no Leonardo da Vinci, no single group able to do that. I think that we would like to create and generate new knowledge, new understanding, application of these techniques to better diagnose, anticipate, design, and perhaps enhance biology and synthetic biology, provide design guidelines. So we wouldn't like to rush into the market, but take a more moderate approach, generating new knowledge that comes from different groups around Europe, so that combined we can reach the market in mid-range, mid-term, but not react to the market, because then we are under the tyranny of the product up front. Yeah.
First of all, does anyone want to answer Ryan's question there?
No, I mean, asking for a specific experience, I don't have any experience with, to observe what would be the, I mean, I was expecting the other way around, but you had the in-person experience, so, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to say, yeah.
The wet lab, and it's like, wait a minute, you can't just hit compile and get the results instantaneously?
Well, my answer would be, undergrads wanted, well, as far as I can see, I've been teaching over the last, 13, 14 years in different capacities. I see that they want to see something happening, like something practical. So when I say that who's going to sign up for collecting earthworms and cutting up in my lab, 10 people lined up in the door of my lab. But when I say theoretical work, I said no one cares about it. I thought, it might be more interesting. That's why I said that.
Very good.
One nanosecond problem. In an effort to be constructive, one solution could be mobility. We talk about
moving people around. Yes.
If you move around and you spend 3 months with an expert in synthetic biology, and then an expert in computation, an expert in experimental method, then you're learning all
Definitely.
Great.
Mobility for students does.
Yeah. We'll just have one last question.
Oh yes. Joint supervision is a model. Andrea is very good. Joint supervision among faculties and then mobility for students. That's the way you work with multidisciplinary.
I can see an ITN coming out here, but the next person who asks a question, that person can volunteer to coordinate it. Weisi, you're okay?
I'm good now.
Listen, I think there was yes.
I want to comment from my side of first year PhD from pure biology. To be honest, I think right now we are the minority here in this room, but I think this will change a lot. Since 1 year ago, I didn't know this molecular communication problem does even exist. It's a complete new information for me and a complete new field, and for now, for me, every day of my science life is a complete adventure. It's complete new, and I think all PhDs surrounding me are really jealous, since I didn't have so much hope for my work life as biologist, to be honest, and this is now a huge motivation just to see this field where I have far more chances right now.
Great.
Finally. Listen, we better wrap it up. I think we've had a really stimulating discussion. It was really fantastic. Thank you all for this, and also thank you to the panel members as well. Thank you, guys. So, just quickly, we are going to now have a social event at the end here. I think they're serving wine, which is great after this stimulating discussion.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.